Hi and welcome to this new video. This video is part of my Sony a7c menu series, and in this video it's all about the first tab in the Sony a7c menu. If you've missed the first video of the video series, you can go and watch it here. It's a simplified overview of the Sony a7c menu, and it also contains tips and tricks on how to navigate faster and easier through the menu. Also, I might just say menu instead of Sony a7c menu. That's just to make things a little bit easier for me. And now let's get started with the topic of this video, the first tab in the menu. The Camera 1 tab contains settings for photography, and each tab is divided even further into chapters, and we can see the names of these chapters right below the 6 tabs. And in the Camera 1 tab we have the following chapters: quality/image size, shoot mode/drive, AF, which stands for autofocus, exposure, flash, color/white balance/image processing, focus assist, and shooting assist. Alright, so now let's start and go through all the items in the Sony menu. I'll show you the items that I use and I'm familiar with, and I'll also show you how I set them up, because then if you'd like to, you can set them up the way I did. We start with the file format, and I've set that to RAW and JPEG, because like this I don't lose any information, and if I want to I can edit the RAW photo to my liking, and for example for my private photo albums then I can just use the JPEGs and I don't have to edit hundreds or thousands of RAWs. Next comes the RAW file type, and I've set it to uncompressed to make sure that I don't lose any information or quality in my photos. As we move on, we have the JPEG quality, and I've set it to extra fine, again to make sure that I don't lose any quality in my images. Next comes the JPEG image size, which I have set to L:24M. I'm pretty sure that L stands for large, and you can also see in the setting that if you choose the L:24M, you get the highest amount of megapixels. Further, we have the aspect ratio, and here I've set it to 3:2 for photos, and if I need to change it to 16:9, for example for a thumbnail if I'd like to, then I can do that directly from my function menu. I have a quick access there. Next comes the APS-C Super 35, which simulates an APS-C sensor when turned on, and this results in an approximately 1.5 crop in the image, and like that you lose some quality. In video it's not that bad, you nearly don't notice it, or I don't, but in photo you see it. I use it sometimes and then I turn it on, and for the rest it's switched off. At least that's the plan. I had it so many times that I was just shooting somewhere and was like thinking, the lens is not good enough, or why can't I get the whole building or this whole frame in it, and then maybe 2 hours later at another spot then I realized, oh, I had the APS-C Super 35 on, and I was like, oh, why didn't I notice that? So just keep that in mind, because that can be quite annoying. But the function itself, when you need it, when you want it, it's great. On page 2 I have set up the color space to sRGB, and that's the standard color space for digital cameras. Moving on to page 3 we have the next chapter, and that's the shoot mode/drive chapter. And the first item in this chapter that we're looking at is the drive mode, that we can also access from the back of our camera by pressing the left button on the control wheel. In the drive mode we can change the shooting mode from single shooting to continuous shooting to self-timer and so on. And another thing that, yeah, it took me quite a long time and a few gray hairs to find it out, is that you can change the settings of specific shooting modes. So for example, the self-timer has different options. You can have a 2-second self-timer, a 5-second self-timer, a 10-second self-timer. And you can see that because the icon of the self-timer has arrows on the left and on the right. and they suggest, or they show you these arrows, that you can press the left and right button of the control wheel and change the setting of the self timer. And for example, the single shooting doesn't have those arrows, so there you have just this one option and that's it. Next we have the interval shooting function, and I use this function or this setting only when I want to record a time lapse, and for all the rest I have it turned off. And here you have a time lapse that I recorded last December with the interval shooting function. But I've planned to do a separate video on how to create a time lapse with the interval shooting function. Keep an eye out for that one. And by the way, that video about the interval shooting, it's also part of the series. You see it here in the overview. Next we have the memory and recall items, and with this settings you can save often used shooting modes to the mode dial, and there are 3 numbers on the mode dial, so number 1, number 2 and number 3, and I've set them for filmmaking. On the number 1 I have it all set up for 25 frames per second, the number 2 is for 50 frames per second, and the number 3 is for 100 frames per second. That's the slow motion on the A7C. I've already done an in-depth video about the memory and memory recall settings, and I'll link the video up here for you. Moving on to page 4, we have the AF chapter, the autofocus chapter. And the first setting we have here is the focus mode. Here you can choose between different focus modes, as for example the single shot autofocus or the continuous autofocus, or for example also the manual focus. And I usually use the AF, so the single shot autofocus, like that. And for moving subjects, then I switch to the AFC, so to the continuous autofocus. And for astrophotography, or sometimes also videos, I use the manual autofocus. Next we have the focus area, and I pretty much always have it set to wide. And if I want to focus in a precise spot, then I use the touch focus. And we'll see that together later, or in a future video, because it's in the 5th tab. On the next page we have the AF tracking sensitivity, and I have it set to locked on, because like this the autofocus won't be affected by subject passing behind the subject or in front of the subject. Skipping forward to page 8, we have the exposure chapter, and in here we have a closer look at the ISO. You can also access the ISO with the right button on the control wheel from the back of your camera. But in the menu you can set the ISO range limit, and that's useful if you don't want to shoot over or under a certain ISO value. So you can say, for example, I only want to shoot the ISO from ISO 50 to ISO 4000, and all that is above I won't do that. And then you just set a limit, and ISO 4000 is the maximum that you can go. Next we have the metering mode, and I've always set that to multi, because this way the camera determines the right or the proper exposure regarding the whole screen. Next we have the phase priority in multi-metering, and if you have the setting turned on, then the camera automatically exposes correctly faces and subjects in the frame. On the next page we have the exposure step, and the exposure step regards the plus minus 0.0 on the display. That 0.0, or that value there, shows you if you are underexposed, then you have a negative number, or if it's 0.0, then you're correctly exposed, and if you're overexposed, it's a value that is over 0. So the exposure steps regard if you have 0.5 steps on your display on this plus minus 0.0 value, or 0.3 steps. And I've set it up to 0.3 steps because like that I get the value of plus 1.7 that I need when I record S-Log. By the way, I put a lot of effort and work into this video, so if you like it, leave a like or a comment below. That would be awesome. Also on the creating side, I just posted a clip of a fawn. It was so magical, and diving into wildlife and learning this new craft makes so much fun. And on Vero, I shared a still from this clip as a photo, and one is graded and the other is not, and I'm pretty proud but also pretty fascinated about how much you can do also in video. Back to the video topic, on page 10 we have the flash chapter, and here we have an item that is called red eye reduction. I don't use flashes, but I thought it might be interesting and useful, maybe for the future, and if you use flashes, it might be something for you. On page 11, aka the color/white balance/image processing chapter, we have the white balance, and I've pretty much always set it to auto white balance, and you can also access the white balance from the back of your camera. It should be the down button on your control wheel. If it's not, you can set it up in the custom buttons. I'll link you the video up here. Next we have the picture profile, and I use the picture profile for shooting in S-Log. When I shoot photos, I always have them switched off. So for filming, you maybe remember from before, I've set up the mode dial, the numbers 1, 2 and 3. So when I enter or when I use one of these numbers, then the picture profile that I need automatically gets turned on. And if you want to know how you can set it up, then I'll link you my memory and memory recall video up here, and you can do that as well. On page 13, aka the Focus Assist chapter, we have the focus magnifier. I've set that up as a custom button so that I can access it directly from the back of my camera. Next we have the focus magnifier time, and I've set it to no limit, because like that I don't have any stress to like set the focus and take the picture. Next is the initial focus magnifier, and I've set that to 1 time, so that when I hit the focus magnifier custom button, I'll get a preview of the area that will be magnified, and then I can adjust the area that I want to have it magnified. So for example, if it's in the middle and I want to have it in the top right corner, I can put it there with the up and right button of the control wheel, and then I can hit enter and I get the magnification. Next is the AF in focus magnifier, which I have enabled so that I can use the autofocus inside the focus magnifier. Next again is the manual focus assist, which I have enabled as well, so that I can use the focus magnifier also in manual focus. Next comes the peaking setting, which I have enabled, because like that, when I have the peaking enabled, I can see which part of my frame is in focus. And if we hit enter on the peaking setting, we get 3 further items. One is to enable it, to turn the peaking on, and the 2 others are about the level of the peaking and the color. I've set the level to high and the color to red. And now on the back of the LCD screen, or the back of our camera on the LCD screen, we can see which part of the frame is in focus. So there where you can see the red peaking showing up, there lies the focus. On the last page of the first tab, we have the shooting assist chapter, and in here we have a look at the anti-flicker shooting. So some lights flicker and we can't see that with our eyes, but the camera can. And because of that, I've turned this anti-flicker shooting on to avoid flickering lights showing up in my footage. Now as a final overview, I've got you the first tab and its chapters with all the settings that we've just looked at. And I hope that this will be helpful for you to locate where the settings that we've just looked at are within the first tab. Also below at the bottom of each chapter, I left a few free slots so that if there is a setting that is important for you but that I didn't cover, you can fill it in there and use this overview for your work. So take a screenshot if you'd like to. What is a cool function or a setting used often of the first tab of the Sony menu? Write it below in the comments, because like that we get this great collections of settings of the first tab and we can learn from one another. I count on you. Write your comment below. Thanks for your comment. Now, if you're looking at this video series, the next video in the series is gonna be the one about the second tab. I'm gonna produce that and upload that video next. You know how it works. Like, subscribe and hit the bell if you want to support me. And thanks a lot for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!